Hello again. Well, today I'm at All Saints Church in the village of Tilney All Saints in the county of Norfolk, and I'm here to investigate the various legends associated with a man who won fame and fortune throughout the district for slaying a terrible man-eating ogre. The giant killer Tom Hickathrift is mentioned many times in the folklore of East Anglia, and according to tradition, Tom was also a giant, and he is buried here in Tilney All Saints churchyard. According to legend, Tom Hickathrift was born in the reign of William the Conqueror and was the son of a poor Cambridgeshire labourer. By the age of 10, Tom was already over 6 feet tall. However, he was dim-witted and extremely lazy. But when it became apparent that he had the strength of 20 men, people began pestering Tom to work for them. So reluctantly, he ventured out more and more from his home. One day, a brewer from King's Lynn offered Tom a new suit of clothes and as much food and drink as he wanted if he agreed to deliver beer from King's Lynn to Wisbeach, a 20-mile journey that took him round the territory of a fierce ogre that dwelt in the marshlands. Tom knew that he could halve the length of his journey by cutting across the ogre's territory, but knowing of its fearsome reputation, he made the long detour. One day, Tom became fed up with this, and on his next journey he took the short route, and he resolved to test the ogre's might. From his cave, the ogre saw Tom coming. He leapt out and bellowed,
"Do you not see how many heads hang upon yonder tree that have offended my law? But thy head shall hang higher than all the rest for an example."
To which Tom replied, "A turd in your teeth for your news. You shall not find me like one of them." The ogre, enraged, returned to his cave to fetch a club, while Tom upended his cart and took the axle and wheel for a sword and shield. And after a mighty battle, Tom battered the ogre's head clean off his shoulders. In the giant's cave, Tom found enough gold and silver to make him rich for the rest of his life. And when word got around that he had killed the ogre, he became a hero throughout East Anglia. And Tom is depicted on the village signboards of Marshland St James and Tilney All Saints. Now there is some truth to the legend. Around the time of the Norman invasion, a great conflict broke out between the inhabitants of the marshland towns and the new landlords over the rights and boundaries of the Smeeth, an area of land between Wisbeach and King's Lynn. Tom Hickathrift encouraged his neighbours to stand up and fight for their liberties. He took the axle from a cart which he brandished as a sword, and one of the cartwheels which he held as a shield, and with these weapons he fought off the invaders. Over time, the story was greatly embellished. Tom became a giant, and the invaders became a terrifying ogre who lived in the marshlands of the Smeeth. The sight of a mound, possibly a barrow, which stood at the Smeeth in a field not far from the former Smeeth Road railway station, was known locally as the Giant's Grave or Hickathrift's Wash Bowl. However, the barrow was destroyed in the early part of the 20th century, and now only a shallow circular depression remains in Hickathrift Field, situated behind the local primary school. This is St Peter's Church, in the village of Walpole St Peter. Its tower dates from the 13th century, and it is known as the Cathedral of the Fens due to its impressive size, and it is regarded as one of the finest churches in England. Now, according to legend, a game of football took place here in the churchyard between the devil and Tom Hickathrift, and during the match the devil kicked the stone ball at Tom. It missed and went through the church wall. And somewhere on the outside of the church is a stone statue, traditionally said to be that of Tom Hickathrift. Now, one of the most striking features of the church is this tunnel that runs beneath the eastern end wall of the chancel. In fact, it runs right under the altar. Now, it was used for medieval processions, and then sometime in the 18th century it was used as a stable. You can still see the tethering rings left in the wall. Now, I've had a good look around, and the stone figure of Tom Hickathrift on the church is proving to be quite elusive thus far. Well, I found the statue with the help of the church groundskeeper. He's a lot smaller than I imagined, the statue I mean, not the groundskeeper. Now, the figure is traditionally said to be that of Tom Hickathrift. However, historians have identified it as a caryatid, I hope I pronounced that correctly, which is a sculpted female figure used as a pillar or a support, and it's probably Roman. As you can see, it's very weathered, and there's no way of knowing if it's meant to be male or female. Now, as I said at the start of the video, Tom Hickathrift is buried in the churchyard of Tilney All Saints, so let's go and find his grave. Okay, we're back in Tilney All Saints, but before I go looking for the grave, I just want to show you one more thing. Now, this stone pillar is known as Hickathrift's candlestick. It's one of three that were collectively known as Hickathrift's candlesticks. There's one in the churchyard of Terrington St John, and another in the grounds of Terrington Court. Now, legend says that the holes on the top of the pillar are the marks of Tom's giant fingers, but they are just the holes where the cross once fitted. I prefer the legend. Right, I'm going to see if I can find the grave of Tom Hickathrift. If he was a giant, then presumably his grave isn't too hard to find. And here it is. And it wasn't too hard to find. This simple stone marks the grave of the legendary Norfolk giant Tom Hickathrift. Now, it is said that when Tom was a very old man, he threw a large boulder and it flew across the marshland, and he said that wherever the boulder falls is where I will be buried. Just so happened to land here in the churchyard of Tilney All Saints. A very simple marker, just says Hickathrift. The grave is about 8 feet long, so presumably this was how tall he was. Now, Tom's grave was once covered by a large stone coffin, but when it broke in two, it was taken inside the church for safekeeping. And here it is, the stone coffin lid from Tom's grave. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it was taken inside the church when it broke in two sometime in the 1880s. Now, I don't know if you can make it out, but there are carvings on the lid said to represent the weapons Tom used to defeat his enemies, namely the cartwheel and the axle. Now, there are many tales of Tom's exploits and gallant deeds, and like other legendary figures such as Robin Hood and Hereward the Wake, who was another Anglo-Saxon hero of the Fenlands, their tales of heroism have been greatly exaggerated and sometimes interchangeable. For example, Tom choosing his burial place by throwing a boulder over a great distance is reminiscent of Robin Hood on his deathbed, shooting one final arrow and asking to be buried where it lands. However, there is no evidence that Tom is buried here, or even if he existed at all, but it's a fascinating legend. Well, that was my look at the various legends of the Norfolk giant and giant killer Tom Hickathrift. As usual, if you've made it this far, then thank you very much for joining me, and I do hope you'll join me again on my next adventure.